Excuse me? Is this thing on? Stop the presses. Hold the phone. It's time to step up to the mic. Here's what's going on in your community.
Hello, fair Mike FM listeners and or viewers. We appreciate you tuning in for another Humans in Tune segment with 93.9 Mike FM. It is Darren Bergfeld with you. And in the hot seat today, we have Dr. Elizabeth DuBois, who is just amazing. And I'm so glad you guys get to experience this conversation today. I encourage you to engage with us in the comments section as you're on Facebook and say hi. Welcome, Dr. Liz. Thanks for joining me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
All I was missing was fireworks for the, grand industrial intro. Pew, 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 pew. They're going off right now. Thanks for joining me. It is awesome to have you, and I'm glad that we've been able to connect. You're a pretty dynamic person, and I've been excited about this conversation because those who watch this and those who know me know I'm all about the positivity and bringing things forth and trying to find the best, getting the best out of people to make them feel like they're giving their best and you're getting the best. It's just trying to make a win-win out of as much as possible on this planet. And you're doing it every day with people from all walks of life. But we're going to talk a little bit about, your work on a day-to-day basis. We're going to talk a little bit about your history. And again, I encourage those who are watching live on Facebook to throw a comment up. I am paying attention to the comments, so we'll see them. But yeah, so welcome. So you currently live in the Northeast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in the Mid-Atlantic, just outside of Annapolis.
Right. Because she lives on an island, kids, and that's just part of your interesting story. So, you're doing the fantasy island thing. You got your son there to say deplane. So let's talk about how you got where you are.
Our airport is maybe 2 minutes from us. So it was a more funny joke than you even knew.
Excellent. So you've got a PhD in psychology, correct?
Conflict analysis and resolution with focus on trauma.
And that to me sounds like if I've got a problem, you're the one to call. You're the mediator. You're going to find a common place where conversations can happen.
Yeah, I actually, can I curse? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, it's Facebook.
Cool. I give two fucks about helping people find resolution between two parties. Right. So my real interest is in helping individual people open up their brain, kind of pop the top and figure out what are the underlying conflicts that have arisen from childhood or from earlier in their life that are dictating their reactions to conflict now. Okay. So, for example, right, if I have a divorce coaching client, I do high-level professional development, coaching, executive coaching, and divorce. If I've got a divorce client and they are very invested in a particular aspect of something that they're fighting about in this settlement agreement, that they can't find resolution and they're so attached to it, and it's right, and they're spending thousands of dollars on lawyers, attorneys, and nobody's giving in. And what I do with that person is I walk them backwards to an earlier time in their life where they felt like they were not able to have what they needed, have what they wanted in order to feel safe and secure. And we, from that place, identify, okay, if we can make this kind of 10-year-old version of yourself feel safe in this moment, what does that version of you need in order to walk away from this thing peacefully or to see this in a different perspective? Oftentimes what people do, I call it, they'll drop the rope, right? You've got two parties in a conflict and they're playing tug of war. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So if we can wrap ourselves in love, the younger version of ourselves, the part of ourselves that feel kind of activated by a conflict, if we can minister to that part instead of being like, I can't believe I'm being so stupid about this, right? Like the reason you're being so stupid about it is that there was some experience in your life that led you to believe that you are not safe unless you could control this particular thing. So once we can feel safe, we drop our side of the rope, which means we get to walk away. But it's also super fun to watch the other party fall on their butt, right? When you've been like, right?
Yeah.
In a divorce, right? So if I'm working with someone and they are having a large conflict at work, right? Let's say they're junior partner at a law firm, they're being asked to take on 300 cases when the industry standard is 75. We work on what part of you felt like at a younger time you had to take on more than what you really could in order to feel accepted, in order to feel worthy of love. And once we can kind of surround that part of you with love, you can go, oh man, I'm being treated like crap. And you can go find a new job where you're loved and accepted once you step out of that kind of codependent relationship with a manager and you're able to say, I don't need this person's approval because the person's approval that I need is my own. And therefore, I don't have to deal with this schmuck anymore.
Right. Self-affirmation.
Self-affirmation, right? It all comes to how much are you willing to trust and care about yourself? Because if you trust and care about yourself, you don't go kind of looking for love in all the wrong places, right?
Yeah. It's a great song too, by the way. So I guess it's kind of almost like, you know, when you talk about finding that one thing, it's almost like in a medical sense, how you would treat cancer. You find that root element that has been embedded in, I guess, in their psyche that has caused them to develop that necessity for that element or that, you know, that piece of things. And by finding that and isolating it and put it in a new perspective for them, then you're creating basically the new need and that self-realization.
Yeah, I call it the root trauma pattern. That's exactly what I call it. You know, and the potential of accelerating what you do in your life when you address this is so powerful. I had a client come to me. She was in one industry. She was the owner of the company, her company, but she was exhausted by it and had been like expressing herself by writing novels in her spare time. She was making a fair amount of money doing it. And she came to me and she was like, yo, this is the direction I want to go in my life, but I feel a little less confident about it. I'd like to be making more money, right? And just for context, she was making about $6,000 a month, right? This was not chump change. And we went backwards, found the root core trauma and addressed it, right? Looked at kind of the behavior pattern from a childhood experience that led her to believe she had to overperform and that it wasn't safe to be exceptional. I mean, really, that was what it came down to, was she had done something in her childhood that made her exceptional and she got bullied for it. And so she has been walking around the world saying, I'm only allowed to be so successful. I'm only allowed to hit a certain mark before I'm going to lose love. So I'm going to kind of hold myself back from really accelerating, you know, and in a year of working together, she's gone from 6K, 8K months to 100,000K months and, you know, sitting on the Amazon top 10 list consistently. So the potential to change your life radically through doing this work is limitless.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you don't think about that as, because most of us think, you know, we just try to succeed as much as possible. But yeah, there's a lot of that. And to see you able to open up somebody like that and be able to open up their ceiling, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make it limitless. So in this day-to-day work that you're doing, is this something that, you know, at an early age for you, something compelled you to just, have you always kind of been in that vein of thought of, you know, trying to help others succeed and accelerate their successes and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think in various flavors, right? The driver for me, I've had two driving interests. One is I've always been fascinated with entrepreneurship and business ownership. And then two, I've always been really fixated on improving other people's lives. And that has looked like I've taken different technical approaches in a lot of different seasons in my life. I worked in public policy. I worked in nonprofit executive management for quite some time. When I came to interpersonal conflict resolution and trauma, it was really because I had burnt out hardcore on the idea of what I always talked about was that kind of metaphor where there's a man walking down the beach and he's throwing starfish back into the ocean that had washed on the shore, and some, you know, jerk walks up and he's like, oh, you think you're going to make a difference? And the guy's like, I bet I made a difference to that one. He throws the starfish back.
Right.
And for me, the metaphor that drove my career for a long time, I always said, you know, I change the tide. I fix whether or not, well, not fix. I influence how many starfish get washed up the beach, right? I do that by changing laws. I do that by programs. I do that by teaching university. And I got to a point in the process of my own career where I burnt out, like my bandwidth to be available to other people to look at systematic change was completely gone. I just didn't have the capacity.
Is that because you felt like you piled too much on yourself, or was kind of that futility of the starfish, even though you were doing it in bulk, so to speak, that was kind of affecting you?
It was twofold, honestly. Well, I mean, my divorce was very difficult. I divorced someone that I cared about a lot, who I still care about a lot. So there was the interpersonal side of things, but then I reached a point where, are you familiar with that children's song, There's a Hole in the Bucket?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working in Baltimore, working in advocacy around education funding. And there was always a hole in the bucket, right? You couldn't fix this because this was broken. And you couldn't fix that thing that was broken because this thing was broken, right? And my dissertation that will soon be a book is really about kind of like, a lot of this goes back 400 years to the roots of this being a slave port. And there's only so much influence that can be leveraged until there's a lot of sociocultural changes that happen. And that became exhausting to me. It just became exhausting to me. I my organization published an open letter in the midst of Baltimore had 60 schools without heat in the winter of some year. I'm not remembering correctly. It's a blur. And we published this open letter on social media. And instantly I had leaders of color and leaders of color saying, you're not doing enough. This was tepid. This was bullshit. This was like a softball, blah, blah, blah. And I had people in the white business community literally calling me as I'm in the grocery store, calling for just berating me. And I was like, I don't think I'm the person that's going to be helpful right now because I'm just too emotionally drained. And then the other side of it was I was just being fake. I'm an alcoholic. I'm in recovery. And the night that I decided I was done, I was at a fundraiser. I was with a potential donor and we're sitting having chit chat. And she's telling me how to make the perfect Kir Royale. And I'm, need her money. And so I'm sitting here playing along like, oh, that sounds delicious. Like, meanwhile, one of the things I'm the most grateful for is I'd not had a drink since 2006. Nice. And so I'm sitting here like lying to this woman's face that this sounds delicious when, for me, it's poison.
Right.
And then up comes the Mayor Catherine Pugh, who is a criminal that went to jail, but at the time was just someone that I was quite critical of, as were many other leaders.
Right.
So me and this donor are chit-chatting, and here comes the mayor, and the donor and I are like, oh gosh, she's such a fucked up bitch. Hi, how are you? And I was just like, I'm being fake here. Like, I just am unwilling to play the game anymore because I can't.
Yeah.
So I resigned, and there was the organization had a financial crisis, and I was just like, I can't. I can't. So I took about 6 months kind of applying to other public policy jobs and just was coming up with bupkis. And I'm spiritual, and I went to bed one night and I just kind of yelled at God. I was like, fuck you. I will go be a waitress again. Just tell me what I am supposed to be doing. Right. And I woke up the next day and I knew I was supposed to be coaching. And I kind of kicked and screamed a little bit about that. I'm like, it's an unregulated industry. Everybody's a life coach. Fuck this. But so it took a little while, but I very quickly found my niche. And I, I've gotten to work with active members of the military. I've gotten to work with people who have gone through sexual violence experiences. I have clients all around the world. And every day that I get to do this is such a privilege.
And I think above all out of that, what I'm getting is that at the end of that, and God said, okay, go ahead, but just listen, I'm going to put you there. And you got there, you were able to be yourself. You were able to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Not to quote Hamlet, but
Yeah, no, for sure. The thing that I preach above all else is authenticity. If you are being someone that society told you to be in order to be loved, you're playing by somebody else's rules. And, you're going to get to the end of your life and be like, gosh, I wonder who I could have been if I was myself.
Right. Yeah. Nothing like looking back with regret.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I kind of fall in line with that we chatted before on air about how I got back into radio, and I feel like this is where I'm at, because this is where I'm meant to be, to bring people like you to people like these that are watching and listening. And and just making lives better.
Mhm.
So now you're at this point, how much travel, how's that work for you? You've got a son. Like, how does your day to day look like now?
The pandemic made it really easy. I see clients on Zoom. So, I can be in Malta in the morning and Toledo in the afternoon and Canada in the evening and New Zealand the next day. And that's generally what my week looks like. There's a lot of different geographic hopping, and it's really fun, although my accent gets muddled by the end of the week.
I would imagine, yeah.
I grew up in a lot of different regions in the US, and so my accent is a bit malleable. And by the end of the week, I'm just like, F if I know.
Yeah, right. Oh, today I think I've been in Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Of course, we talked a little bit about you being in an island, living on a yacht, and that, it's not like you just woke up one day and said, I think I'll go live on a yacht. Like, this was perpetuated kind of by the pandemic, right?
No. The thing that you said the first was correct.
Okay.
And the one that sounds more reckless, that's the one.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. Seems like a good day to buy a yacht.
It's a good story. It's a good story. So I read a Washington Post article probably like 15 years ago at this point that talked about people that lived on boats, which called liveaboards. People that lived aboard. There was a huge settlement in DC, and there was the largest community of liveaboards on the East Coast. And I was like, holy, like, I could afford to live in DC, which I lived in DC anyway, but I couldn't afford it. Like, I can afford to live here. This would be amazing. And I've always felt just a really deep spiritual connection to the water. So it was something that me and my ex-husband had talked about, and it was kind of this like thing that maybe one day would do. And then in 2019, I broke up with someone at the beginning of the year, and I was still so in love with this person. But they were just treating me small. They were treating me small. And I made a commitment to myself when I broke up with him. I said, I'm going to play all out, as big as I can, as hard as I can. I'm going to go for every dream I've ever had. And I just started viewing the world through that lens. And about 2 weeks after I left that relationship, my mom called and said, hey, my partner can't go on a cruise next week and it's fully paid for. And would you like to go? And I was like, fuck yes, I'll see you there.
Twist my arm. Yeah.
Yes, please. So I just made this commitment. I kind of married myself. I vowed, that I'm all out, live. My commitment was I'm going to be all of myself all of the time. I was going to live bigger.
That is ambitious.
I had in lipstick, live bigger. Every mirror in my house, it said live bigger in lipstick. And my cleaning lady probably thought I was an axe murderer or something, but that's all right. So I'm on this boat. And I've made this commitment to myself. And I was doing some workshops by a woman named Lacey Phillips. Her website is just tobemagnetic.com. It's TOBE magnetic.com. So I'm doing these inner child workshops while on a cruise with my mother. And I was rereading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I was just like grounding into who I am. And so we go on one of the day excursions. We're like floating in the bay in St. John in the US Virgin Islands. And my intuition, my God, whatever you want to call it, was just like this clear, like, you're supposed to go do this thing. You're supposed to go live on a boat now. And I was so in a place of willingness to do whatever felt true to myself that I was like, jolly good. All right, let's go.
Right.
And so back on the cruise ship, I found the Washington Post article and I called the real estate agent in it from the cruise ship. And I said, I'm a single mom. Is this fucking crazy? And she was like, no, isn't. I had a young kid when I did it. It's the best thing ever. I have 3 boats now. And so I just went for it. And yeah.
What was your learning curve like for that? I mean, did you have experience, on the open water other than the recent cruise?
No.
I mean,
I've been on a powered boat like 3 times in my life.
Like, I've been on a pontoon boat at a lake once. I got this. Forget about it. Yeah.
I'd never been on a pontoon.
But you've managed to make it work, right? I mean, that was
Yeah,
live
I
or die at
really
that point. You learn or die. So,
sink or swim,
yep. Yeah. Yeah.
literally. I called around. I everyone that I talked to was like, you can't rent a boat. And I was like, haha, you don't know me. So of course I found a boat and I rented it, and I moved me and my son on it. I sublet my apartment in Capitol Hill. And the second my kid got onto the boat, he had really been crying a lot about not wanting to leave Capitol Hill. And it was really
losing
hard.
that familiarity that, that's how kids subsist. So,
Yeah, exactly. So we get aboard. We'd been aboard 2 minutes, maybe. And he turns to me and goes, never mind, mommy, let's do this forever. And
that's awesome.
we just had a magical time. So after about 6 weeks, I started to get really serious about purchasing. I had been unclear about whether I was getting a houseboat or a yacht. And my spirit just said, keep going for like more adventure, more adventure. And so every night my son and I would fall asleep to Jimmy Buffett's Boats to Build.
Nice.
On our Alexa, and we would just kind of be like, we're getting this boat and it's going to be great. And, I just started the process of really feeling into like, what is the right vessel? And then the law firm that I was coaching at wanted everyone back in person. And I had a 5-year-old, 6, I don't know, very young child at that point. He was still in kindergarten, and we were still like early in the days of the apocalypse. And I was like, I can't be back. And so I hired a business coach, and she's in New Zealand, and I hired her, and I said, I want to leave my job in 3 years. That's why I'm hiring you. She said, 3 years? What the fuck, 3 years? Are you mental? And so we had our first session, and then I quit my job 3 days later. And then 6 weeks after that, I bought the yacht in cash, and I was just like, let's go.
Yep. Kick the tires and light the fire, so to speak.
Love it.
And you didn't look back, right?
I mean, unless I was backing the boat up. But,
right. Can you parallel park the boat? That's the real question.
Funny thing so I had gas engines, offset twin engines, and our starboard engine had a really shitty habit of breaking. And so more often than not, I was docking just on the port engine, right? And the thing about twin engines is like, if you only have one going, you spin in a circle, right?
Right.
And so I'm steering against the one engine. Plus, we didn't have a bow thruster. It was an older boat. And so I was like, I'm fairly new mariner, and I figured this out. And, I may not have done this long, but back up. I know what I'm doing.
That's right. No Caddyshack moments where you're plowing through the dock, right?
I mean, I did have one of those, in fairness.
Yeah.
But I have good insurance. I have really good insurance.
They probably appreciated the new dock.
And I took out a power tower leaving a marina. It was not the best moment of my life.
That'll put a frown on some folks' faces, I'm sure. So then, yeah. So you hop on the boat. You're able to start working remotely. How quickly?
I worked remotely.
Remotely. Oh. Well played. That's stellar. So you worked remotely. How did you have a pretty good repertoire of people that you were ready to kind of get going with, or how did you build things at that point?
I had been divorce coaching in-house at a law firm, and they very graciously allowed me to take my client roster with me if the client reached out to me. So They sent letters, and then the clients reached out to me. So I had a couple of people in pocket, and just built it up from social media, like built it up from the ground up of, I've got enough scraped, like I was really hoping to make $2,000 that first month. That was really my goal. I had some savings and had some other sources of revenue because I was still teaching university at the time. And I was like, okay, if I can clear $2,000, I will be okay. Things are going to be great. And I can build it from there. And that first month I made $6,700 and just kind of took it from there. And, 6 months later was comfortably clearing $50K in sales months. And I was just like, okay, I think this will be okay.
Yeah, I think this will work out.
Yeah, exactly.
You can afford to buy another dock.
But again, good insurance.
That's right.
No
So,
need.
so here you are now, and you've got this established practice, and a lot of your work is with high-end executives, and they're getting burned out on work, and you're helping them find that repurpose. And we talked briefly about that, at the top of the show. How do you apply that to? Obviously, we've seen how you've applied, these things to your own life. But for Joe that's tuned in watching right now, that's like, yeah, I've been a radio DJ for 18 years, and I'm burned out, and I want to do something else. I can't. I have a love for this, or I have a love for that. How do they? Because a lot of people, I think, a big part of it for them is cutting the chains and taking that chance. You took that chance. You bought the yacht in cash. A lot of people are very rooted, especially here in the Midwest, and are very proud of those roots, and have a hard time cutting the ties and taking off and trying something new. What do you suggest that they take a look at introspectively or otherwise?
Yeah, cool. So I'm going to tweak, clarify, and then answer the question. So 100% of the people come to me because they want to go further faster. So it's less about, I'm not a veterinarian that takes in broken wings and teaches them to fly. I am a high performance coach standing at the edge of the track, explaining how you can get even more traction as you propel yourself towards the Olympic trials. And I think that there's a lot of lessons for that for anyone. So first off, I think that there's probably a misconception, right? That high performers are somehow different than Joe Schmo, right? And I grew up in Kings Mill, Ohio, so I'm familiar with the Midwest and all of it, right? My family's all from Cleveland, and I get it. This burned in ethos that you get what you get and you don't get upset. And when you pan out and you say, okay, who is benefiting from me having this mentality that I've been raised with, right? Here's your mashed potatoes, here's your meatloaf, here's your belief that, if you work for the auto industry and have a $17 an hour job plus a pension, you're doing great, right? All of these different things, we're going to serve them to you on a platter. This is going to be your belief system. Yum, 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 right? When you look at who is benefiting from the belief system of here's your hourly wage, here's your benefits package, you're able to get your kids to school in the morning and tuck them in at night, and life is great, right? We have this belief system that's what we should expect, right? But when you pan out from that and you say capitalistic structures are benefiting from this, right? And they are no longer providing me security, right? We have in America had kind of a social contract that large companies and stable employers are going to provide us the means to be secure, be stable, right? Both of my parents had pensions in different ways. My dad had a pension. My mom took a buyout. My grandparents above them had pensions, right? Mm-hmm. Both of the folks, all four of them stayed with companies for a very, very, very long time. My mom retired from the same company she started at. That contract's broken, right? Because we figured out how to make the gig economy work for large employees. We figured out how to make Airbnb work. We figured out how to make, door dashers. If you've got a bicycle, you can make $10 an hour, right? And so we have the little folks scraping together income to the very best of their ability, right? Living with crushing credit card debt, living with crushing student debt, right? A lot of people, when they say, oh, you have student loans and blah, 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 those student loans compound interest, right? The same way a credit card does. Right. So I graduated with almost $500,000 in debt. That's far bigger now, right? Because every year, so we have a shortage of nurses, we have a shortage of doctors, we have all of these positions in our society that we're not able to fill adequately because we've created structures that benefit kind of the system, if you will, right? Versus individual people that just want to be able to afford to take their kids to the doctor, right? Like, I just want to be able to afford, sending my kid to summer camp for the year so that he can camp out the same way that I did every year. But because we've broken these social contracts, we have people saying, I have the mentality that my employer is supposed to provide for my well-being, but I have the reality that is quite different than that, right? And so for those of you that are listening to this and saying, I'm really struggling and I'm doing it wrong, and something's broken about me and I can't afford gas right now, and that makes me bad because I should have saved up, right? If you're in your head about the ways that I have caused this problem, what you are ignoring is that these are structural choices that have been made in the service of larger power systems staying in play. And so where does that leave us as far as action, right? Now we can get angry about it, but what do we do about it, right?
Right.
And so what I want to encourage everybody to do is look at what are the skill sets that you have that actually make you really happy, right? Not that make you $17 an hour. What makes you really happy? And how do you then monetize that? Because I promise you, whatever it is that brings you tremendous joy, there is a market for you to get paid for that.
Yes, especially today. I mean,
especially
with the tech and the availability of that.
Absolutely, right? If you're, hypothetically say, I don't know anybody in my life like this, I'm winking, nodding. I'm trying to talk a friend into doing this, right? If you love working on cars, right? What is the way that you can serve your community doing that, right? There's people like where I live, there's huge disparities in income. There's tons of wealthy people now commuting into DC because we're only an hour away. They're starved for time. Like I know for me, something is wrong with my car at the moment. I haven't gotten it fixed yet because I don't have time to get to the mechanic during the time that they are open, right? Because this is an old school mechanic and they're like, we're open from 9 to 5.
Yeah. Can you drop it off and pick it up later?
Yeah. I'm like, well, fuck me up the ass.
How am I going to get anywhere?
Yeah, exactly. Right? And so, right, if you can create a mobile mechanic business, I promise you there's a market for it, right? If you are super into, I don't know, give me an idea, I'll come up with a thing.
Bike riding.
Cool. Great. Where are the needs and where's the need in your community for bike riding things? How do you organize on social media a bike riding club for kids where they come in and for $10 they learn how to tighten the chain if their bike chain comes off, right? What are the things that teaches new moms how to install the bike seat or new dads right on the front of the thing? So it starts with number one, what do I love? Number two, where's their community need? And then number three, what structures do I need, right? You need a way for people to pay you. You need a bank account. You need a payment processor. You need some way of keeping track of your books so that you pay the government so they don't hate you, right? These things don't have to be super complicated. You don't have to have a business plan. You didn't have to go to Wharton. You don't have to have a business coach, although, for what it's worth, you might collapse your timeline from three years to 3 days if you do.
Right.
It's possible to monetize something and do it quickly if you avoid people that are like, well, you have to have a business plan and you have to spend a bunch on marketing. A coach was trying to sell me a product and they were like, well, I mean, you're not a new coach, but when we start with the newbies, they have a really hard time grasping that they need a marketing budget. And I'm like, LOL, I have an international $250,000 company. I've never spent a penny on marketing.
Right. Yeah. And I think to that point, when they find that what makes them happy, figure out, a path that they can choose to do that. Just like you, there's people out there who have found their path, and their path is being a business advisor or helping someone provide with a business plan or, like most of us, if we've got kids, family, mortgage, blah, 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 not a ton in savings to pour into some new project. You feel like a fool if you're going to dump $50,000 into investing into some stamp collecting club or something that you want to create. Yeah. But there are opportunities between grants, locally, state, nationally, et cetera. Our community here does a first 50K competition for startups. So they come in with their business plan, they present, they pick one out. Here's $50,000, go out and, like our bicycle guy, maybe he decides he wants to create an app-based messenger service, hireabike.com or something. They can get that funded and then be able to make that dream come true through that grant or through that gift, that way. Those opportunities are definitely there. I don't even have to be the guy in the question mark suit. I don't even remember what his name was. You remember that guy who used to do the infomercials about findagrant.com or something like that? Those opportunities are all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I had 6 months of I'm trying to think. I had 6 months of operating expenses, meaning I could go for 6 months before we starved to death.
Right.
And my child wouldn't have. He has a very beautiful, active co-parent. His dad and stepmom are amazing. But before I starved to death,
Right.
and,
on your yacht.
So I didn't have a grant. I didn't have startup funds. I had like $13K cash in my bank account and like $20K available to me in credit. And I was just like, I know for sure I can't stay in my current job because they need me in person. And so what's my next best option? And instead of panicking about it, I had this mentality of just like, what's going to work, right? As Joe Dirt would say, can't have no one in heart.
It's
right?
battlefield survival, right? You assess what you've got and you make use of those things to achieve what you need to do.
Exactly. And I think that we have a culture, I'm 38. I think folks that are of my generation and older and probably a little bit younger, we were spoon fed this mentality that you grow up and you get a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Get out of school, go to college, get a job, have a family, cha-cha-cha.
Exactly. Right. I call it the conveyor belt because there's so many adults that follow that path and then the conveyor belt breaks and they're like, oh, I got a divorce and now I'm a fuck up, or I haven't gotten married yet and I'm a fuck up.
That's me about 15, 16 years ago. So
yeah, but we only feel, right, it's the interpersonal conflict side, right? We only feel bad about ourselves for that because we're listening to what society says, right?
Yeah.
If we listen to our heart, right, and we're like, I'm in an abusive, fucked up marriage, I'm going to get out of here. The truth is, I am making a wise decision and a courageous one, right? But society's like, well, you had a failed marriage.
Right.
Your picker is broken, right? What if it was just, you could pick a partner and then if it didn't work out, you could pick a new one, right? Or pick yourself instead of this story of I'm doing it wrong. What if instead of saying, oh, you're bouncing around jobs, like, yeah, because every boss I've had has been toxic as shit.
Right.
And I'm choosing myself, right? 1 in 3 businesses fails in the first year. Well, okay, but mine's not gonna.
But 2 out of 3 succeed. So
yeah, exactly. Right. And so what I did, I knew I had this little bit of runway. And so I found a backup job. I found a bridge job, right? And it was VIP kids. It was teaching online, teaching English to kids in China. And I was like, great, I can make up to $2,000 here. If I really can't make a go of the coaching thing, that'll be where I go.
At least you've got a mattress to land on if you fall off the roof.
Right, exactly. It was like, I'm not going to starve. I'm not going to get kicked out of my home. I'm going to figure this out. But because I had this, I think there's IQ, there's EQ, and then what I call scrappy Q, right? And I was scrappy. I was like, let's fucking go.
Right.
I had hired the woman that I hired to, after the kind of 3-day quit, she was my second business coach I'd hired, and I'd invested a fair amount of money. I think it was about $15,000 at that point. I invested this money and I was like, there is no way I'm not making this back because I have my own back, right? I'm all in. And I think when people decide I'm weird for wanting to do this because this is not the way it's done, right? And this is especially true in the Midwest, right? And I have a client in Ohio actually, and she's run up against this where people are like, yeah.
How dare you break the mold?
Yeah, she started her first business at 16. She was off to the races. Now she's making quite a bit more money in a job than the average person in Ohio. And she gets a lot of flack for it. And I think when we discourage excellence because it's different and it breaks the mold, we really rob our society from a lot of different innovation, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, think of that. Think of the innovators in history. I mean, what was the difference between, the madman and the genius was success, right? So if you're doing it and you're doing it right and you're doing it well and you're succeeding, you're a genius. You're your own genius. And by not subscribing to everything else, maybe 10 people poo-poo it, but maybe 15 people get inspiration from that and say, you know what, they did it, I can do it.
Yeah, or maybe it changes the whole fucking planet, right?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that'd be nice.
Yeah, but think another Midwestern example, right? Think about how Orville and Wilbur Wright's mom must have gotten chit-chatted with.
Oh my
right?
gosh, yeah.
Going around Oakwood High. Oh my gosh. Right, the bless your heart that your boys are still doing
Yeah.
that crazy shit. Oh, bless your heart, right? And meanwhile, our kids are like in Kitty Hawk making, the first man flight. And it's just like when we decide as a culture that people are weird or crazy for trying something new, we're discouraging innovation that's really in a dangerous way, right? Because we may have the cure to cancer. We may have the cure to AIDS. We may have the cure to poverty. We may have the cure to homelessness, right? But when we take people who look at the world differently and they're like, I don't know, I see it a little differently. And we say, you're broken and you're fucked up and you're weird. They don't pursue the kind of goals that they may have percolating in their heart because they're like, well, I don't want to be weird.
Yep. And you're blowing out the light.
Yeah, exactly. So, to encapsulate in one sentence what my job is, it's to fan that flame. I take people's brains apart and I say all of the different reasons, all of these childhood memories, all of the societal programming that you have been inculcated with that told you that you're weird and bad. We're going to forget all of that. We are going to plug you into you instead of plug you into this social bullshit. And from that place, you can shine as bright as you want.
That's awesome. This is good stuff. I'm so glad that I was able to have you on today for Humans in Tune. If somebody wants to learn more about you and they want to just dive in on the Dr. Liz story, where are we going to send them?
www.soul, like your soul, Dr. Dr. Liz, Soul Dr. Liz.
Oh, that's funky. I like that.
Soul
Dr. Liz.
Yeah, he is.
That's awesome. Okay.
So I work with executives. I work with people going through divorce. No matter where you are in the world, we can work together if it's a good fit.
That's awesome. Dr. Liz, thank you so much for being my guest today.
You're so welcome.
This is another Humans in Tune segment. Hang out for just a second. I'm going to catch you before you bail on me, but want to say thanks to everybody who tuned in. Again, if you just tuned in at the end and you're like, oh, poop, I missed it. Hey, it stays here on Facebook. You can hang out. You can catch it here. It'll also be repurposed on our podcast at 939 Mike FM. We will see you next time for another segment of Humans in Tune. Thanks to Dr. Liz, and we'll see you next time. Peace.